In 1869 Texas, 19-year-old Ezra Colt faced a devastating choice: marry the town's feared black widow Constance Hartwell to save his family's ranch, or lose everything to the bank. But when the 65-year-old widow's dark secrets began unraveling, and her dangerous stepson returned to claim her fortune, Ezra discovered that sometimes the most terrifying reputation can hide the most vulnerable heart, and that his reluctant bride might be the one person worth fighting for. What happens when a young cowboy realizes the woman everyone fears might be the only one who truly understands him? The gunshot echoed across the Texas plains like God's own thunder, and 19-year-old Ezra Colt knew his life had just changed forever. He dropped his shovel and ran toward the ranch house, his boots kicking up clouds of red dirt in the blazing afternoon sun of 1869. His father lay crumpled on the porch steps, blood spreading across his worn cotton shirt like spilled paint. "Pa!" Ezra's voice cracked as he knelt beside the man who had raised him alone after his mother died in childbirth. "What happened?" Samuel Colt's weathered hand gripped his son's wrist with surprising strength. "Bandits," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the buzzing flies. They wanted the deed. I wouldn't give it." But Ezra saw no bandits. He saw only his father's eyes growing dim, and the ranch that stretched endlessly around them, 500 acres of the finest grazing land in all of Brazos County. The cattle lowed in the distance, unaware that their world was about to crumble. "The bank?" Samuel gasped. "Harold Grimm. He's been waiting for this day." Those were his father's last words. 3 days later, Ezra stood in the dusty main street of Cedar Creek, watching townspeople file past him like he was already dead. Women pulled their children closer when they saw him. Men tipped their hats but wouldn't meet his eyes. Everyone knew what happened to young men who couldn't pay their debts in Texas. The First National Bank of Cedar Creek loomed before him like a courthouse on Judgment Day. Its brick walls seemed to pulse with heat, and the windows stared down at him like empty eye sockets. Ezra's hands shook as he pushed open the heavy wooden door, the brass handle burning his palm. Inside, the air felt thick as molasses. Harold Grimm sat behind his massive oak desk, like a spider in its web, his thin fingers drumming against the polished wood. Papers covered every inch of the surface loan documents, property deeds, and IOUs from half the county. "Ezra Colt," Grimm said without looking up. Right on time, the banker's voice reminded Ezra of a snake's hiss. He had heard that voice in nightmares for the past week, ever since his father's funeral, when Grimm had whispered those terrible words, "The debt comes due in 7 days, boy." "Mr. Grimm," Ezra said, his voice steadier than he felt, "I've come to discuss payment terms." Now Grimm looked up, his pale blue eyes gleaming with something that might have been amusement. "Payment terms? Son, your father owed this bank $3,000. That's more money than most men see in 5 lifetimes. $3,000. The number hit Ezra like a punch to the gut. He had counted every penny in the ranch house, searched every hiding place his father might have used. The total came to $43.16. "I can work," Ezra said desperately. "I know cattle. I can break horses. I'll do anything." "Anything?" Grimm's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Well now, that's interesting. Because there might be one way to settle this debt." Hope fluttered in Ezra's chest like a trapped bird. "What way?" Grimm leaned back in his leather chair, which creaked like old bones. "There's a woman in this town who needs a husband. A wealthy woman. She's agreed to pay your father's debts in full if you marry her." The hope died as quickly as it had been born. "Marry? But I'm only 19. Old enough to work. Old enough to wed." Grimm pulled a document from the pile on his desk. "Constance Hartwell. Perhaps you've heard of her?" Every person in Cedar Creek had heard of Constance Hartwell. She was the richest woman in 3 counties, owner of the largest cattle ranch in Texas. She was also 65 years old and had buried 2 husbands in the town cemetery. The children called her the Black Widow, though never where adults could hear them. "She's older than my grandmother would have been," Ezra whispered. "Age is just a number, boy. Money is what matters." Grimm spread the papers across the desk like playing cards. "Your father's debt, paid in full. The ranch stays in your family name. All you have to do is say, 'I do,' at the altar." Ezra stared at the documents, the words blurring together like ink in water. His father's signature appeared on every page. Proof of loans taken during bad seasons, medical bills from when cattle got sick, payments for seed and equipment, and a dozen other necessities that had seemed so small at the time. "What does she get out of it?" Ezra asked. Grimm's smile grew wider. "A young, strong husband. Someone to help run her ranch. Someone to—" He let the sentence hang in the air like smoke. The thought made Ezra's stomach turn. He imagined wrinkled hands touching his face, gray hair spread across a pillow, and he nearly ran from the bank right then and there. But then he thought about his father's grave, still fresh with black earth. Samuel Colt had worked every day of his life to build something lasting, something to pass down to his son. Now that legacy hung by a thread thinner than spider's silk. "How long do I have to decide?" Ezra asked. "Until tomorrow at noon. After that I foreclose on the ranch, and you'll be lucky to find work mucking stalls for 50 cents a week." Outside, the Texas sun was setting, painting the sky the color of blood and fire. Ezra walked home through streets that no longer felt familiar, past houses where people he had known all his life now watched him from behind curtains like he was some kind of dangerous animal. At the ranch, he sat on the porch where his father had died and listened to the cattle settling down for the night. An owl hooted somewhere in the darkness, and coyotes yipped in the distance. These were the sounds of his childhood, the music of the only home he had ever known. By morning, his decision was made. The Hartwell mansion stood on the hill overlooking Cedar Creek, like a castle from one of the fairy tale books Ezra's mother had left behind. Its white columns gleamed in the morning sun, and its wraparound porch could have held his entire ranch house twice over. Ezra had never been inside a building so grand, and his boots felt clumsy on the polished wooden steps. He knocked 3 times, each rap echoing through the house like gunshots. When the door opened, he expected to see Constance Hartwell herself. Instead, a small Mexican woman with kind eyes and graying hair smiled at him. "You must be young, Señor Colt," she said in accented English. "I am Maria, the housekeeper. La Señora is waiting for you in the parlor." The inside of the house took Ezra's breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from painted ceilings, and oil paintings covered the walls. Thick rugs from faraway places muffled his footsteps, and furniture that looked too fine to sit on filled every room. Maria led him down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women in fancy clothes. Their eyes seemed to follow him as he walked, judging him for his worn shirt and patched pants. "Do not be nervous, mijo," Maria whispered. "La Señora. She is not what people say." Before Ezra could ask what she meant, they reached a set of double doors made from dark wood carved with roses and vines. Maria knocked gently, then pushed the doors open. "Señor Colt is here," she announced. The parlor was the most beautiful room Ezra had ever seen. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, making the gold threads in the wallpaper shimmer like water. Books filled shelves that reached to the ceiling, and a grand piano sat in one corner like a sleeping giant. But Ezra barely noticed any of it, because Constance Hartwell commanded his attention completely. She sat in a high-backed chair, upholstered in blue velvet, and everything about her spoke of power and money. Her silver-gray hair was piled high on her head and held with jeweled pins. Her dress was made from fabric so fine it seemed to glow, and rings flashed on her fingers as she gestured for him to sit. But her eyes surprised him. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held intelligence and something else, sadness, maybe, or loneliness. "So," she said, her voice carrying just a hint of an accent Ezra couldn't place, "you're the young man who thinks marrying me is worse than losing everything he owns." Heat flooded Ezra's face. "Ma'am, I never said—" "You didn't have to. Your face says it all." She stood gracefully and moved to the window, her skirts rustling like autumn leaves. "Let me make something clear, Mr. Colt. This arrangement benefits us both, but it will be a business partnership, nothing more." Ezra found his voice. "What exactly would you expect from me?" She turned from the window, and sunlight made a halo around her silver hair. "I need a husband in name only. There are men in this county who think a woman alone is easy prey. They circle my ranch like vultures, waiting for any sign of weakness." "What kind of men?" "Cattle thieves, land grabbers, politicians who think my property would be better served by someone with different anatomy." Her smile was sharp as a knife blade. "A husband, even a young one, sends a clear message that I am not defenseless." Ezra thought about this. "And in return, you pay my father's debts? $3,000 plus interest. The papers are already drawn up." She moved to an elegant desk and picked up a stack of documents. "Your ranch remains in your family name. Your father's legacy is preserved, and you gain access to resources that could make you one of the wealthiest young men in Texas." "Access to resources?" "I own the largest cattle operation in the state, Mr. Colt. I have connections in Austin, San Antonio, even as far as New Orleans. Work with me, learn the business, and when this arrangement ends, you'll have knowledge and contacts worth more than gold." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "When does it end?" Something flickered across her face, an expression too quick to read. "When my legal situation is resolved. A year, perhaps 2 at most." "Legal situation?" "Nothing that concerns you." The sharpness returned to her voice. "Do we have an agreement or not?" Ezra looked around the magnificent room, then thought about his small ranch house with its leaking roof and broken furniture. He thought about his father's grave and the promise he had made to keep the family name alive. What would people say? A 19-year-old boy marrying a woman old enough to be his grandmother? People will say many things. They always do. She returned to her chair and fixed him with that penetrating stare. "The question is whether you care more about their opinions or your father's memory." The words stung because they were true. Ezra had spent the last week worrying about what everyone would think, how they would whisper and point and laugh. But his father had never cared about gossip when there was work to be done. "If I agree," Ezra said slowly, "where would I live?" "Here. In this house. You would have your own rooms, your own space. We would appear together at social functions. Attend church side by side. Present a united front to anyone who might challenge our arrangement. And privately? Privately, we would be business partners and nothing more. I have no interest in romantic complications." Relief flooded through Ezra, followed immediately by a strange twinge of disappointment that he couldn't understand. "What about my ranch? My cattle? Your stock can graze on my land. Your property will be maintained and improved. Consider it an investment in our mutual future." Maria appeared in the doorway with a silver tea service, the china cups rattling gently on their saucers. As she poured, Ezra noticed her watching him with those kind eyes, and he remembered her words. "La Señora, she is not what people say." What did people say? That Constance Hartwell was cold, calculating, dangerous to any man foolish enough to get close to her. But the woman sitting across from him didn't seem dangerous. She seemed lonely, tired, like someone carrying a heavy burden with no one to help shoulder the load. "I need some time to think," Ezra said. "Time is what we don't have." Constance set down her cup with a delicate clink. "Harold Grimm is not a patient man. Every day you delay is another day he has to find alternative arrangements for your debt." "What kind of arrangements?" Her smile held no warmth. "The kind that involves selling you to work gangs in Mexico. The kind where debts are paid in blood instead of money." Fear crawled up Ezra's spine like a cold hand. He had heard stories about men who crossed the wrong people, who disappeared in the night and were never seen again. "You're saying he would—" I'm saying Harold Grimm always collects what he's owed, one way or another. Marriage to me is the only option that keeps you alive and free." The clock on the mantelpiece chimed 11 times, each note hanging in the air like a countdown. 1 hour until Grimm's deadline. Constance stood and walked to a portrait hanging above the fireplace. It showed a younger version of herself, standing next to a tall man with kind eyes and graying hair. "My second husband," she said without being asked. "Jonathan Hartwell. He was a good man who married me for companionship after we both lost our first spouses. We had 5 happy years together before his heart gave out." "I'm sorry," Ezra said, and meant it. "Don't be sorry. Be smart." She turned back to him. "This arrangement saved both our lives once. It can save yours now." She moved to the desk and picked up a pen, its gold nib catching the light. "The wedding can be tomorrow morning. Simple ceremony, just the legal requirements. By tomorrow afternoon, your debt will be paid, and your ranch will be safe." Tomorrow. The word hung between them like a bridge he could either cross or burn. Ezra thought about his father's calloused hands teaching him to rope cattle. He thought about long evenings on the porch listening to stories about his mother, who had died bringing him into the world. He thought about the promise he had made at Samuel Colt's graveside to honor the family name, no matter what it cost. "What guarantees do I have?" he asked. "My word. The word of the Black Widow of Cedar Creek?" Her laugh was surprising, rich and full, not bitter as he had expected. "Yes, the word of the terrible Black Widow, worth more than any contract Grimm could draw up, I assure you." The clock chimed the quarter hour. 45 minutes left. Ezra closed his eyes and tried to imagine his father's advice. Samuel Colt had been a practical man who believed in taking calculated risks when the stakes were high enough. "All right," Ezra said, opening his eyes. "I'll do it." Constance nodded as if she had never doubted his answer. "Maria will show you to your rooms. We have a wedding to plan." A strange sound echoed through the mansion at midnight, gentle humming, mixed with the soft scratch of chalk on slate. Ezra crept down the dark hallway, expecting to catch Constance counting her mining money, like the town gossips claimed. Instead, he found something that made his breath catch in his throat. "Very good, Pedro," Constance whispered to Maria's 8-year-old grandson. "Now try writing your name again." Her voice was warm honey, nothing like the sharp ice she used with townspeople. The boy's tongue poked out in concentration as he formed letters on the small chalkboard. Ezra pressed himself against the doorframe, watching in amazement. This was the woman everyone called the Black Widow? The same person who supposedly drove men to early graves? Here she sat, patiently helping a Mexican child learn to read, when most folks in town wouldn't even talk to the boy's family. "I did it," Pedro whispered, bouncing in his chair. "Look, Senora Constance." "Perfect," she smiled, and the expression changed her entire face. Lines of worry melted away, revealing someone younger, kinder. "Tomorrow we'll start with numbers. Maria will be so proud." The floorboard creaked under Ezra's weight. Constance's head snapped up, her mask of coldness sliding back into place faster than a gunslinger drawing iron. "How long have you been lurking there like a thief?" Pedro scrambled from his chair, eyes wide with fear. "I'm sorry, Senor Ezra. I wasn't supposed to be here this late." "It's all right, boy." Ezra stepped into the room, his mind racing. Nobody's in trouble. After Pedro scurried away, Constance stood stiffly, her fingers drumming against the desk. The warm woman from moments before had vanished completely. "Well, are you going to run tell the whole town that Constance Hartwell wastes her evenings on charity work?" Ezra looked around the study for the first time with seeing eyes. Books lined every wall, not just mining reports and business papers, but stories for children, books about teaching, even medical texts. A stack of slates sat on a side table, covered with different handwriting. How many children had learned their letters in this very room? "How long have you been doing this?" he asked quietly. "Doing what?" Her chin lifted in defiance. "Teaching kids to read, helping families who can't afford schooling." He picked up one of the slates, recognizing the shaky letters of a beginner. This looks like little Lucy from the general store. And this one might be Tommy from the blacksmith's shop. Constance's shoulders sagged slightly. 3 years. Ever since the schoolmaster died of fever and the town council decided they couldn't afford a replacement. Her voice grew bitter. Apparently, an education isn't important when you're too poor to matter. But why keep it secret? Why not let people know you're helping their children? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. You really don't understand this town, do you? If people knew I was teaching their precious children, half would pull them out immediately. The other half would expect me to do it for free forever. This way, the children learn, and I don't have to deal with their parents' judgment or greed. Ezra sank into Pedro's vacated chair. Everything he thought he knew about his wife was crumbling like a house built on sand. What else don't I know about you? More than you could guess. She moved to the window, staring out at the moonlit canyon. And probably more than you want to know. Try me. For a long moment, she was quiet. Then, without turning around, she began to speak. I pay Dr. Henderson to visit the Mexican families once a month. Most can't afford medical care, and he was going to stop coming entirely. I also convinced the bank to give the widow Martinez an extra 6 months to pay her mortgage. Told Grimm I'd cover it myself, if necessary. The town doesn't know about any of this? The town knows what I let them know. That I'm cold, calculating, and dangerous to cross. It keeps them from asking uncomfortable questions or expecting things I can't give. Ezra stood up, moving closer to her. What kind of things? Her reflection in the dark window looked haunted. Friendship, trust, the benefit of the doubt. She finally turned to face him. I learned long ago that being feared is safer than being loved. Fear is reliable. Love makes you weak. Is that what happened with your other husbands? You were afraid to love them? Something flickered across her face pain. Maybe, or regret. My first husband loved me, or so he claimed. Right up until our daughter died. Then love turned to blame, faster than lightning strikes. He spent his last years telling anyone who'd listen that I was cursed, that death followed me like a hungry dog. And the second? James was different. He married me knowing the stories. Said he didn't care about gossip. He was kind, gentle. We had 3 good years together. Her voice grew soft with memory. But when his heart stopped beating one winter night, the whispers started again. Poor James, they said. Another victim of the Black Widow's curse. Ezra felt a strange ache in his chest. So you decided to become the woman they already thought you were. It was easier than fighting their expectations. She picked up a piece of chalk, rolling it between her fingers. If I'm going to be blamed for every tragedy that touches me, I might as well use their fear to do some good. Scared people, leave me alone. And when people leave me alone, I can help children learn to read without interference. But doesn't it get lonely? Living behind all those walls? Lonely? She considered the word like it was foreign. I suppose it does. But loneliness hurts less than betrayal. And it definitely hurts less than watching people you care about turn against you when times get hard. Ezra thought about his own situation, forced into marriage to save his family's land, stuck with a woman he'd been taught to fear. Maybe we're both hiding behind walls. What do you mean? I mean, maybe I've been so worried about what people would think of me marrying you that I never stopped to wonder who you really are underneath all the stories. She studied his face in the lamplight. And what if you don't like what you find underneath? What if I do? The question hung in the air between them, like smoke from a campfire. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance. Lonely and wild. Inside the warm circle of lamplight, 2 people who had been strangers began to see each other clearly for the first time. There's something else you should know, Constance said finally. Something that might change how you feel about this whole arrangement. Ezra's heart started beating faster. What? Tomorrow, we're going to have visitors. Important ones. And they're going to ask questions about our marriage that we need to be ready to answer. What kind of questions? The kind that could destroy everything we're both trying to protect. She blew out the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Get some sleep, Ezra. Tomorrow, we find out if our marriage can survive its first real test. Hoofbeats pounded up the canyon road like war drums, shattering the morning quiet and sending Maria's chickens squawking in every direction. Ezra dropped his hammer and peered over the barn roof where he'd been fixing loose shingles. A lone rider approached at full gallop, expensive suit, fancy horse, and trouble written in every line of his body. The man reined up in the courtyard, dust swirling around his mount's legs like smoke from a fire. He was tall and lean, with cold gray eyes and a cruel mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. His clothes screamed money, the kind of money that came from cities back east, not honest work. Well, well, the stranger called out, his voice carrying the smooth poison of a snake oil salesman. If it isn't the famous Hartwell Ranch? Though I suppose it should be called the Colt Ranch now, shouldn't it? Ezra climbed down from the roof, his instincts prickling like a cat sensing a storm. You looking for someone, mister? Oh, I found exactly who I was looking for. The man's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Marcus Hartwell's the name. I've come to meet my dear stepmother's new husband. The front door slammed open with such force it bounced off the wall. Constance stood framed in the doorway, her face white as bleached bone. For the first time since Ezra had known her, she looked truly afraid. Marcus. The name fell from her lips like a curse. I heard you were in San Francisco. Business has a way of calling a man home, doesn't it? Marcus swung down from his saddle with practiced grace, but his movements reminded Ezra of a predator circling wounded prey. Besides, I couldn't miss the chance to meet the boy who thinks he can take my father's place. Ezra felt his muscles tense. Something about this man's presence made every nerve in his body scream danger. Your father's been dead 7 years, from what I hear. Has he now? Marcus's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Funny how death doesn't stop a man's business from affecting the living. Especially when that business involves wills, inheritance, and beautiful young widows who might not be as secure in their fortunes as they pretend. Constance stepped onto the porch, her hands gripping the railing so tight her knuckles went white. What do you want, Marcus? What I've always wanted, stepmother dear. What rightfully belongs to me. His eyes swept over the ranch buildings, the corrals, the canyon beyond. My father's legacy. His land. His money, everything he left to his grieving widow instead of his own flesh and blood. The will was legal. Judge Morrison confirmed it himself. Ah, yes, old Judge Morrison. Fine man. Pity he died last winter. Marcus pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. His replacement, Judge Crawford, has some very interesting ideas about inheritance law, especially when it comes to marriages that might be considered fraudulent. Ezra's blood ran cold. What's that supposed to mean? It means, boy, that a marriage between a 19-year-old cowpoke and a 65-year-old woman might raise some eyebrows, especially when that marriage happens suspiciously close to a rather large debt being forgiven. Marcus unfolded the paper with theatrical slowness. People might wonder if such a marriage was real, or if it was just a business arrangement designed to keep an inheritance out of the hands of a man's rightful heir. You can't prove anything, Constance said, but her voice wavered. Can't I? Marcus's smile widened like a crack in ice. I have witnesses from town who say you and the boy barely spoke before the wedding. I have bank records showing the debt forgiveness. I have testimony from people who've seen you living like strangers under the same roof. He paused, savoring his next words. And I have something else. Something that's going to make this whole house of cards come tumbling down. Ezra stepped closer to Constance, his protective instincts flaring. If you've got something to say, say it. Oh, I will. At the proper time, in the proper place. Before a judge who understands that a man's fortune should go to his son, not to some woman who collected husbands like other people collect stamps. Marcus folded the document and tucked it away. I'll be staying at the hotel in town. We wouldn't want to impose on the happy couple, would we? He remounted his horse with the same predatory grace. Enjoy your domestic bliss while it lasts, stepmother, because I promise you, it won't last much longer. The hoofbeats faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt like trying to breathe underwater. Constance sagged against the porch railing, looking older than her 65 years. Who was that man really? Ezra asked quietly. My second husband's son from his first marriage. Her voice was barely above a whisper. James tried to make peace with him before he died, but Marcus never forgave him for marrying me. Said I was a gold digger who'd stolen his rightful inheritance. But the will was legal when James wrote it. But laws change, judges change. And Marcus has had 7 years to plan his revenge. She looked up at Ezra with haunted eyes. He's not going to stop until he destroys me completely. And now, by marrying me, you've painted a target on your back too. Ezra thought about the gentle woman who taught children to read in secret, the kind soul who paid for medical care for families who couldn't afford it. The idea of Marcus destroying her made his chest tight with anger. Let him try, he said firmly. Whatever game he's playing, we'll figure out how to beat him. You don't understand. Constance gripped his arm with surprising strength. Marcus isn't just after money, he's after blood. His mother died giving birth to him, and his father never remarried until he met me. In Marcus's twisted mind, I stole the only parent he had left. He won't be satisfied with taking the ranch. He wants to see me broken, humiliated, left with nothing. Then we don't give him the satisfaction. How? If he can prove our marriage is fraudulent, I lose everything. The ranch, the mining claims, even this house. I'll be left exactly where I was 20 years ago, alone, poor, and at the mercy of men who think a woman without a husband is fair game for any kind of treatment. Ezra studied her face, seeing the fear she was trying so hard to hide. What was that document he showed us? I don't know, but knowing Marcus, it's not good. She straightened up, some of her old steel returning. He's been building a case against me for years. Every time I've helped someone in town, every kindness that couldn't be explained by pure business sense, he's probably twisted it into evidence of guilt. What kind of guilt? The guilt of being a woman who dared to inherit a man's fortune. The guilt of marrying again after being widowed. The guilt of trying to build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. Her laugh was bitter. In Marcus's world, those are crimes worthy of punishment. Well, in my world, they're reasons to fight back. Ezra looked toward town, where Marcus was probably already spreading his poison. What do we need to do to prove our marriage is real? Show that we care about each other. Live like a real married couple. Convince everyone in town that our feelings are genuine, not just a business arrangement. She met his eyes. Are you prepared to do that? To pretend to love me in front of the whole world? The word pretend hung in the air between them. Ezra thought about the woman who'd shown him such unexpected kindness, who'd trusted him with her secrets, who'd been hurt so many times, but still found ways to help others. Maybe pretending wouldn't be as hard as he'd thought. I can do that, he said quietly. The question is, can you? Before she could answer, Maria appeared in the doorway, her face creased with worry. Signora Constance, there are men coming up the road. Important-looking men with papers. Constance's face went pale again. It's starting already. She gripped Ezra's hand tightly. Whatever happens next, remember this. Marcus will use every weapon he has to destroy us. Our only chance is to be stronger together than either of us could be alone. The sound of approaching horses grew louder, and Ezra realized their quiet life together was about to become a very public battle. The question was, would their marriage survive the war Marcus was determined to wage? Blood dripped from Ezra's split lip as he stumbled through the kitchen door at midnight. Constance dropped her teacup, the china shattering against the floor like broken promises. What happened to you? She demanded, rushing to his side. Her hands trembled as she touched his swollen cheek. Marcus hired 3 men to convince me to leave town. Ezra winced as she dabbed his wounds with a wet cloth. They jumped me behind the saloon, said next time would be worse. Constance's face went white as fresh cotton. Her fingers froze against his bruised jaw. This is my fault. I should have sent you away the moment Marcus arrived. I'm not going anywhere. Ezra caught her wrist gently. But I need to know what we're really fighting against. No more secrets, Constance. The older woman pulled away and walked to the window. Outside, shadows moved between the trees like dark ghosts. Marcus isn't just after my money, she whispered. He knows something about my past. Something that could destroy us both. Ezra felt ice form in his stomach. What kind of secret? She turned to face him, and for the first time since he'd known her, tears ran down her cheeks. The kind that could get you killed. 3 hours earlier, in the town's only hotel, Marcus Hartwell sat across from Judge Morrison. The judge counted gold coins, while Marcus spoke in low, dangerous tones. The boy's becoming a problem, Marcus said. He actually seems to care about the old witch. Judge Morrison pocketed another coin. Love won't save him from the law. I've already prepared the papers, declaring their marriage fake. That's not enough anymore. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes cold as winter ice. I need them both gone. Permanently. The judge stopped counting. I didn't agree to murder Marcus. You agreed to whatever it takes to give me my inheritance. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. And if that boy keeps protecting her, he'll learn the same lesson my father did. Some secrets are worth killing for. Back at the house, Constance led Ezra to her private study. She pulled a hidden key from behind a picture frame and unlocked a small wooden box. My real name isn't Constance Hartwell, she began, her voice shaking. It's Catherine Wells. I came to Texas running from something terrible. Ezra's heart pounded as she lifted old newspaper clippings from the box. The headlines made his blood turn cold. Bank president's wife accused of theft and woman vanishes with $50,000. I didn't steal that money, Constance said quickly, but I know who did, and that person happens to be Marcus's real father. The room spun around Ezra. Marcus's father? Not the man I married. The man who got my daughter pregnant and abandoned her. Constance's voice grew stronger with each word. Marcus's biological father was the bank president in San Francisco. He stole the money and let me take the blame. When I discovered the truth, I had to run or face prison for his crimes. Ezra stared at the newspaper clippings. Everything suddenly made sense. That's why Marcus really wants you gone. You're the only person who knows his father was a thief. Worse than that. Constance's eyes met his. I have proof. She reached deeper into the box and pulled out a leather folder. Inside were bank documents, covered in an elegant handwriting. Marcus's father kept records of his thefts. He was planning to blame other people if he got caught. When he died, Marcus found these papers and realized I was the only witness left alive. Ezra studied the documents. Even with his limited reading skills, he could see they proved the bank president's guilt. Why didn't you use these before? Because using them would mean admitting, I stole them when I ran. I'd still go to prison. She sank into her chair, looking older than her 65 years. But if Marcus kills us both, the truth dies with us. A loud crash from the front of the house made them both freeze. Boots stomped across the wooden floor, too heavy to belong to Maria. Hide the papers, Ezra whispered urgently. But it was too late. Marcus appeared in the doorway with 2 armed men behind him. His smile was cold and cruel. Well. Having a cozy little chat? Marcus stepped into the room, his hand resting on his gun. I hope you're saying goodbye, because this conversation is your last. Ezra moved to stand between Marcus and Constance. His body ached from the earlier beating, but he wouldn't let fear control him. The whole town knows we're here, Ezra said, trying to keep his voice steady. If something happens to us, they'll come looking. Marcus laughed. The town thinks you're both liars and thieves. When they find your bodies, they'll assume you killed each other fighting over money. One of Marcus's men stepped forward. Boss, maybe we should just scare them out of town instead. No. Marcus's voice turned deadly. They know too much. Catherine here has been keeping secrets that could ruin my family name. Haven't you, dear stepmother? Constance stood up slowly, her chin raised with dignity. Your family name was ruined the day your real father started stealing from hard-working people. Marcus's face twisted with rage. Shut your mouth, you lying witch! She's not lying. Ezra's voice cut through the tension. I've seen the proof. Your father was a thief, and you're following in his footsteps. The room went silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Marcus stared at Ezra with pure hatred. You picked the wrong woman to defend, boy. Marcus drew his gun. Now you'll die for her lies. But before Marcus could pull the trigger, a new voice spoke from the darkness behind him. Drop the gun, or I'll drop you. Everyone turned to see Sheriff Rodriguez standing in the doorway. His rifle pointed directly at Marcus's back. Behind him stood Maria, her face fierce with protective anger. Maria heard the noise and came to get me, Sheriff Rodriguez explained. Good thing too. Looks like I arrived just in time to prevent a murder. Marcus's men immediately raised their hands and stepped back. But Marcus himself seemed frozen, his gun still pointed at Ezra. You don't understand, Sheriff, Marcus said desperately. These people are criminals. They're trying to steal my inheritance. The only criminal I see is the man holding a gun on unarmed people in their own home. Sheriff Rodriguez took a step closer. Now drop it, before I lose my patience. For a moment, Marcus looked like he might fight. His finger tightened on the trigger. Ezra tensed, ready to throw himself in front of Constance. But then Marcus saw the determination in the sheriff's eyes and slowly lowered his weapon. This isn't over, Marcus snarled as the sheriff took his gun. You can't protect them forever. Maybe not forever, Sheriff Rodriguez agreed, snapping handcuffs on Marcus's wrists. But I can protect them long enough for the truth to come out. As the sheriff led Marcus and his men away, Ezra felt his legs go weak with relief. Constance collapsed into her chair, her face pale but her eyes blazing with new hope. He'll be back, she said quietly. Men like Marcus don't give up easily. Then we'll be ready for him. Ezra knelt beside her chair and took her hands in his. But this time, we won't face him alone. And we won't face him with secrets between us. Constance squeezed his hands. No more secrets, she promised. From now on, we tell each other everything. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Texas plains. But inside the house, two people who had been strangers just months ago began to plan their fight for survival. They had the truth on their side now. But would truth be enough to defeat a man who was willing to kill for his lies? Dawn broke gray and cold over the courthouse steps where half the town had gathered to watch the most scandalous trial in Texas history. Ezra's stomach churned as he helped Constance from their wagon, feeling dozens of hostile eyes following their every move. Look at that boy, someone whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Sold his soul for a few pieces of silver. Shame on both of them, another voice added, making a mockery of holy marriage. Judge Morrison sat behind his bench like a king on his throne, his face showing no hint of the bribes Marcus had paid him. He banged his gavel 3 times, and the crowded courtroom fell silent. We're here today to decide if the marriage between Ezra Colt and Constance Hartwell is legal and binding, the judge announced. Mr. Marcus Hartwell claims this union was arranged for fraudulent purposes. Marcus stood up from the front row, dressed in his finest clothes and wearing a smile that fooled everyone except Ezra and Constance. Your Honor, I have witnesses who will prove this so-called marriage is nothing but a business arrangement designed to cheat my family out of our rightful inheritance. The first witness was Harold Grimm, the banker who had forced Ezra into this situation. His testimony cut through the courtroom like a sharp knife. The boy came to me desperate, Grimm said, pointing at Ezra. His family owed more money than they could ever repay. When I suggested marriage to Mrs. Hartwell as a solution, he jumped at the chance like a hungry dog after a bone. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people shook their heads in disgust. Next came 3 men from the saloon who swore they'd heard Ezra bragging about marrying a rich old woman for her money. Ezra knew they were lying, but their words sounded convincing to the jury. "I heard him say it clear as day," one man testified. "Said he'd put up with anything for a few years if it meant living in luxury." Ezra's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to jump up and call them all liars, but his lawyer, a nervous young man named Peter Walsh, had told him to stay quiet. When it came time for their defense, things went from bad to worse. Peter Walsh stumbled over his words and dropped his papers twice. The jury looked bored and unimpressed. "My clients may have married quickly," Walsh said weakly, "but that doesn't make their feelings any less real." Judge Morrison leaned forward with a cruel smile. "Do you have any evidence of these supposed real feelings, counselor?" Walsh looked around desperately. "Well, that is to say, they live together as man and wife." "Living in the same house proves nothing," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "My stepmother is known for her charitable nature. She probably just felt sorry for the boy." The courtroom buzzed with agreement. Ezra felt heat rise in his cheeks as people nodded and whispered among themselves. Then, Judge Morrison dropped his bombshell. "I've reviewed all the evidence," he announced, "and I find this marriage to be fraudulent and invalid. Mrs. Hartwell, you will forfeit all property rights to your stepson. Mr. Colt, you have 24 hours to vacate the premises." The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Constance gasped and grabbed Ezra's arm. Around them, the crowd erupted in excited chatter. But Ezra had heard enough lies for one day. "No," he said, standing up slowly. The courtroom went quiet. Judge Morrison frowned. "Excuse me, young man?" I said no. Ezra's voice grew stronger with each word. "You can declare our marriage invalid if you want, but you can't make me leave her." Marcus jumped to his feet. "You have no choice, boy. The law has spoken." "The law?" Ezra laughed bitterly. "What law says a man can't choose to stay with the woman he loves?" A shocked silence fell over the room. Even Constance stared at him with wide eyes. "That's right," Ezra continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "I love her. Not her money, not her property, but her. And I don't care what any of you think about it." Someone in the back row gasped. Judge Morrison's face turned red with anger. "This is highly irregular," the judge sputtered. "You can't just ignore a legal ruling because of your feelings." "Watch me." Ezra took Constance's hand and helped her to her feet. "Come on, wife. Let's go home." But as they walked toward the door, Marcus's voice stopped them cold. "Not so fast," Marcus called out. "There's something else you all should know about the woman this boy is so eager to defend." Ezra felt Constance's hand tighten in his. Her face went pale as winter snow. "Tell them, dear stepmother," Marcus said with a vicious smile. "Tell them about Catherine Wells and the $50,000 that disappeared from the San Francisco bank." The courtroom exploded. People jumped to their feet, shouting questions and accusations. Judge Morrison banged his gavel frantically, trying to restore order. "That's right," Marcus continued over the noise. "The woman you know as Constance Hartwell is really Catherine Wells, a wanted fugitive who's been hiding in our town for 7 years. Ezra felt the world spinning around him. He looked at Constance and saw the truth written in her terrified expression. "Is it true?" he whispered. Before she could answer, Sheriff Rodriguez pushed through the crowd. His face was grim as he approached them. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me," he said quietly. "There are some questions I need to ask you." "She didn't steal that money," Ezra said desperately. "Marcus is lying. He's trying to frame her." "Maybe so," the sheriff replied, "but I still have to investigate. There's a wanted poster with her picture on it, son. I can't ignore that." As the sheriff led Constance toward the door, she looked back at Ezra with eyes full of pain and regret. "I'm sorry," she mouthed silently. "I'm so sorry." Marcus stood in the center of the chaos, laughing like a man who'd just won the biggest prize of his life. He'd destroyed their marriage, stolen their home, and now he was sending Constance to prison. But as Ezra watched his wife disappear through the courthouse door, he felt something change inside him. The frightened boy, who'd been forced into marriage, was gone. In his place stood a man who'd found something worth fighting for. The battle wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. That evening, as Constance sat in the town's small jail cell, Ezra paced back and forth in the sheriff's office like a caged wolf. "Let me see her," he demanded, for the 10th time. "Rules are rules, son," Sheriff Rodriguez said patiently. "No visitors until morning." Those rules didn't stop Marcus from bribing the judge. Ezra shot back. The sheriff looked up from his paperwork. "What are you talking about? You think Judge Morrison made his decision based on evidence? Marcus has been paying him off for weeks. I saw them together at the hotel, passing money back and forth like cards in a poker game." Sheriff Rodriguez set down his pen and studied Ezra's face. "That's a serious accusation, boy. You have any proof?" Ezra's heart sank. He had no proof. Just his own eyes and the knowledge that honest judges don't usually rule so quickly against the evidence. "No," he admitted. "But I know what I saw." Knowing and proving are two different things. The sheriff stood up and walked to the window. "Your wife is in a lot of trouble, Ezra. That wanted poster came from San Francisco. Says she embezzled $50,000 from the First National Bank. She told me she didn't steal it. She told you a lot of things that turned out to be lies." Sheriff Rodriguez's voice was gentle but firm. "Her real name, her past, her reasons for marrying you. How do you know this isn't just another lie?" Ezra stared at the floor, unable to answer. How could he explain that he'd seen something in Constance's eyes when she talked about her daughter? How could he make the sheriff understand that the woman who taught children to read in secret wasn't capable of stealing money from hardworking people? "Because I know her," he said finally. "Not the person she pretended to be, but the real her. And the real her wouldn't steal from anyone." The sheriff sighed. "Love makes fools of us all, son. But it doesn't change the facts. Tomorrow morning, a marshal from San Francisco is coming to take her back for trial." Ezra felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Tomorrow?" "First, train out." Sheriff Rodriguez returned to his desk. "I'm sorry, Ezra. I truly am. But the law is the law." As Ezra walked out into the night, his mind raced with desperate plans. He could break Constance out of jail, but that would make them both criminals on the run. He could try to find evidence of Marcus's bribery, but he had no idea where to start looking. Then he remembered something Constance had said about having proof of Marcus's father's crimes. If he could find those documents, maybe he could expose the truth before it was too late. The problem was, Marcus now controlled the house and everything in it. Getting inside would be impossible unless he had help from someone Marcus would never suspect. Ezra smiled grimly as he thought of Maria, the housekeeper who'd worked for Constance for years. Maria knew every secret hiding place in that house, and she'd been furious when the sheriff arrested her beloved mistress. It was time to find out just how angry she really was. The clock tower chimed midnight as Ezra made his way through the dark streets toward the house that used to be his home. In a few hours, the marshal would arrive to take Constance away forever. But maybe, just maybe, there was still time to save her. Blood dripped from Ezra's split lip as he stumbled into the house at dawn. Marcus had cornered him behind the saloon, delivering a message with his fists. "Drop this marriage farce, or things get worse for everyone you care about." But it was Maria who held the real weapon. A worn leather bag she pressed into Ezra's bruised hands. "Your wife. She kept these hidden for 7 years." The old woman whispered, glancing nervously toward the door. "Her daughter's letters. The truth about why she really died." Ezra's fingers shook as he opened the first letter, dated just months before the girl's death. The handwriting was delicate, desperate. "Dearest Mama, Marcus says he loves me, but Papa Hartwell forbids our marriage. I fear I am with child, and Marcus grows distant." Each letter painted a darker picture. Marcus had promised marriage, then vanished when his father threatened to disown him. The young woman had died not from fever, but from losing too much blood after giving birth alone in a boarding house. The baby Marcus's son had died 3 days later. "He killed them both," Constance's voice came from the doorway, broken and raw. My daughter died calling his name, hoping he'd come back, and he wants my money as his reward. Ezra looked up from the letters, seeing years of buried grief written across her face. Why didn't you use these before? Because I was afraid. She sat heavily in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 65 years. Afraid the town would say I drove her to it somehow. Afraid they'd think I deserved to lose her. The weight of this secret had been crushing her all these years. No wonder she'd built walls around her heart. Well, I'm not afraid, Ezra declared, gathering the letters carefully. And neither should you be. But as they prepared to face Judge Morrison with this evidence, neither knew that Marcus had been listening at the window. By the time they reached the courthouse, he was already there, spinning his own version of events. Your Honor, Marcus announced loudly enough for the gathered crowd to hear, I have proof that this so-called marriage is built on lies and blackmail. The judge, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, looked uncomfortable. What kind of proof, Mr. Hartwell? Marcus smiled coldly. My stepmother has been threatening to spread false stories about me unless I drop my legal challenge. She's even forged letters to make her lies seem real. Ezra felt his heart sink. Without examining the letters first, how could they prove they weren't fake? But Constance stood tall, her voice carrying across the packed courtroom. Then let's test the truth, shall we? She turned to face the crowd. Mrs. Henderson, you delivered babies in this town for 40 years. Tell everyone what happens when a young woman loses too much blood in childbirth. The old midwife shifted uncomfortably. Well, she'd get pale as snow, then start shaking something fierce. Like my daughter did, Constance continued. And Dr. Phillips, you treated her those final days. What did her symptoms tell you? The town doctor cleared his throat nervously. I always wondered about that case. The girl seemed healthy, until suddenly she wasn't. Almost like she'd been through something traumatic. Marcus's face was growing red. This proves nothing, doesn't it? Ezra stepped forward, holding up one of the letters. Then explain why your own handwriting appears in the margins of some of these love notes you wrote back to her. The courthouse fell silent. Marcus had made a fatal mistake. He'd written responses on some of her letters, then forgotten about them when he abandoned her. Judge Morrison examined the letters closely, comparing the handwriting to legal documents Marcus had signed. These appear genuine, he said slowly, and if what they describe is true, it's all lies, Marcus shouted, but his voice cracked with desperation. Then why are you sweating like a pig in summer? Called out Tom Mitchell from the back. Innocent men don't shake like leaves. The crowd began to murmur. They'd seen Marcus's reaction, heard the evidence mounting against him. Even those who doubted Constance were starting to see the truth. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I find the marriage between Ezra Colt and Constance Hartwell to be valid and binding. Mr. Marcus Hartwell's claim to the estate is denied. But Marcus wasn't finished. As the crowd began to disperse, he grabbed Ezra's arm. This isn't over, boy. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Actually, I do, Ezra replied quietly. I've gotten myself a wife worth protecting. And you've gotten yourself exposed as the coward you really are. That night, as they sat in their parlor, Constance finally allowed herself to cry for her daughter, for the grandchild she'd never known, for all the years she'd carried this burden alone. Ezra held her hand, understanding now why she'd needed those walls, and why she'd finally felt safe enough to let them fall. The truth hadn't just freed them from Marcus's threats. It had freed them from the prison of secrets that had kept them apart. He's back, Maria whispered urgently, shaking Ezra awake before dawn. Marcus came in the night with 5 men. They took all the horses from the stable. Ezra bolted upright, his heart racing. Through the window, he could see smoke rising from their barn. Marcus wasn't just leaving town, he was trying to destroy everything on his way out. But when Ezra rushed to wake Constance, he found her already dressed and loading a rifle. I've been expecting this, she said calmly. Men like Marcus don't accept defeat quietly. You knew he'd come back? I hoped he wouldn't, but I prepared like he would. She handed him a pistol. There's a reason I married you, Ezra. And it wasn't just to pay your father's debts. Before he could ask what she meant, gunshots rang out from the canyon. Marcus and his men were shooting at the mining equipment, trying to destroy the copper claims that formed the heart of Constance's wealth. Stay here, Ezra ordered, but Constance was already heading for the door. This is my fight too, she declared. And I'm tired of letting other people control my life. They made their way carefully toward the canyon, using the rocky outcrops for cover. In the growing daylight, they could see Marcus directing his men to pile dynamite near the mine entrance. He's going to blow up the whole operation, Constance breathed. 20 years of work, gone. That's when Ezra spotted something that made his blood run cold. Pedro, Maria's grandson, was tied up near the explosives. The boy must have been checking on the mining equipment when Marcus arrived. We have to save him, Ezra whispered. It's a trap, Constance replied. Marcus knows we'll come for the boy. She was right, but that didn't change anything. They couldn't let an innocent child get hurt because of their fight. Ezra made his decision. Can you create a distraction from the other side of the canyon? Constance studied the layout, her mind working quickly. The old mining cart tracks, if I can get one rolling down toward them. That might work. Give me 5 minutes to get closer to Pedro. As Constance disappeared into the rocks, Ezra crept toward the mine entrance. His heart pounded so loud he was sure Marcus would hear it, but the man was too busy gloating to his hired guns. Once this place is rubble, the widow will have nothing left, Marcus was saying. She'll be begging in the streets where she belongs. What about the boy? One of the men asked. Marcus shrugged. Accidents happen in mine explosions. Rage burned in Ezra's chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Pedro was counting on him. Then he heard it, the rumble of iron wheels on tracks. Constance had gotten a mining cart moving, and it was picking up speed as it rolled down the steep canyon slope. Look out! One of Marcus's men shouted. The runaway cart crashed into a pile of equipment with a tremendous crash, sending metal flying in all directions. While the men ducked for cover, Ezra sprinted toward Pedro. But Marcus saw him coming. Not so fast, boy. He drew his gun and fired. The bullet whistled past Ezra's ear as he dove behind a boulder. Pedro whimpered from where he was tied, 20 feet away and still too far to reach safely. Come out, little husband, Marcus taunted. Let's finish this properly. That's when Constance appeared on the ridge above them, rifle in hand. The only thing finishing here is your reign of terror, Marcus. Marcus spun toward her voice, giving Ezra the chance he needed. He lunged forward, tackling Marcus around the waist and sending them both tumbling toward the mine entrance. They fought desperately, rolling in the dirt as Marcus's hired men scattered. Most of them hadn't signed up for a real battle, just easy intimidation money. Marcus was bigger and meaner, but Ezra was younger and angrier. More importantly, he was fighting for something that mattered. With a final surge of strength, Ezra pinned Marcus to the ground, just as Constance arrived, with her rifle trained on the defeated man. It's over, she said simply. Marcus glared up at them, dirt and blood on his face. You think this changes anything? You're still a dried-up old woman married to a boy. Maybe, Constance replied, but I'm a dried-up old woman with a copper mine, a husband who loves her, and a town that's finally learned the truth about you. As if summoned by her words, the people of the town began arriving in wagons and on horseback. Word of the morning's violence had spread quickly, and they'd come to help. Sheriff Johnson arrested Marcus and his remaining men. The townspeople helped put out the fire in the barn and began cleaning up the damage to the mining equipment. But the most important moment came when Pedro ran to his grandmother Maria, safe and unharmed. The boy hugged Ezra tightly. Gracias, senor, Pedro whispered. You saved me. We all saved each other, Ezra replied, looking at Constance with new understanding. Later that evening, as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold, Constance took Ezra's hand. "Do you know why I really chose you?" she asked quietly. "Because I needed money and you needed a husband?" She shook her head. "Because the first day I met you, you looked at me like I was a person, not a story. You saw past what everyone else whispered about." Ezra thought about that scared 19-year-old boy who'd walked into the bank 3 months ago. He'd been so afraid of losing his family's land, so desperate to find any solution. He never imagined he'd find a partner, a purpose, and a love that had nothing to do with age or money or what other people expected. "The town's different now," he observed. "They look at you differently." "They look at us differently," Constance corrected. "We showed them that real strength isn't about being feared. It's about standing up for what matters, even when it's hard." In the distance, they could hear the sound of the town's children playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Tomorrow, Constance would open her new school, teaching reading and writing to any child who wanted to learn. Ezra would continue working the copper mine, but now as a true partner rather than a reluctant husband. They'd learned something important in their months together. The best relationships aren't built on what people expect from you, but on what you choose to give each other freely. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, each one a point of light in the vast Texas night. Ezra squeezed Constance's hand gently. "No regrets?" he asked. "Only one," she replied with a small smile. "I wish we'd found each other sooner." Sometimes the most unexpected partnerships become the strongest ones. Sometimes what begins as necessity becomes choice. And sometimes two people who seem to have nothing in common discover they have everything that truly matters. The desert wind carried their quiet contentment across the canyon, a sound of two souls who'd found in each other exactly what they needed, not what the world expected, but what their hearts had been searching for all along.